All right, so we're in part two of our leading change conversation. And if you remember from part one, we talked about some of the limitations of the top-down approach to leading change. And that is, it mostly drives compliance. And for many of us, compliance is not going to be good enough to be sustainable in whatever industry we operate in. So what's a more bottom-up approach look like that's going to drive more commitment? Well, part of the answer to that question has to do with the size of your company. So for a smaller company, let's say 150 or less, you could probably do something we would call a future search process with a group that small, because you can get them all in the room together, and over a couple of days, we can go through the process where we look at where have we been historically as a business and how have we grown it? What are the current trends that we need to stay on top of that are facing us? And then what's that future we want to co-create together to address those trends and stay on top of those trends? And because we got everybody in the organization in the room at the same time going through this together, we can feel confident that wherever we land, people are going to want to move it forward and make it happen. And so it's more bottom-up driven by the nature of the way we engage them in that process. But for a lot of us, we're in much larger organizations, and so we're going to have to come up with a hybrid of sorts. And so this is what we've used with clients from bigger organizations. Then we start to look at, we need to take a cross-section of their people through these types of questions, and we have to do it multiple times until we get a critical mass. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. So the first thing you want to think about is, I want to get roughly 80 to 120 people at a time, and they need to be from all parts of the organization. So different business units, different functional groups, different levels. So you want upper management in there, all the way down to rank and file, to signal to everyone that we all need to be engaged in this to make it happen. So you got your 80 to 120 people. You also want to think about, are there some other stakeholders that maybe we want to invite into this conversation? Maybe there's some key customers and key suppliers that would be great to have be a part of this. Maybe even regulatory, if we can get them there, right? So think about broadly about key stakeholders we want to involve in this conversation. You're going to need to probably push out some baseline data to everybody so that we're all working from the same data set around what's currently going on in the business as our jumping off point. Because for the rank and file folks, they may not be usually exposed to that kind of information, so you're going to need to coach them a little bit and push that out in advance so people can see that. You're going to need a steering team of 8 to 10 people. Not necessarily, again, all upper management, but I would pick natural leaders who are respected in the organization, seen as having good facilitation and people skills, to be at every one of these to pull through the themes that are coming up over and over again. You're going to need external facilitators like us to do this, because it's not going to work if you have upper management trying to facilitate this process, because then it's just going to look like a top-down approach again. So that's some of the components you need to set this up for success. Takes a couple of days for each cycle, and then you got the question, well, how many of these cycles do we have to run if I got thousands of people in my organization? Our answer is you got to probably get at least 40% of your people to go through this, and better to be safe up to 60% to get to a tipping point. You don't have to get everyone, but you need that 40 to 60 to signal to the organization that they are serious about wanting to get all of us, with a majority of us, involved and engaged in terms of figuring this out. If you get that 60% through, they'll pull the other 40% through on their own, because the others will see that, okay, it's all of us now moving this forward. It's not just a top-down driven thing. So those are some of the components around how do you do a more bottom-up approach. One other thing you need to be aware of when you do this. So for that 40% who weren't a part of this, who are back kind of keeping the operation going and keeping the lights on, you're going to have to tell the managers back there about the fact that we're going to have some fired up people coming back to work, wanting to try some things differently. And we need those people, those managers back there, to be supportive of what these guys want to do in terms of trying out some new ways. So that's one caution. We also might need to do some coaching with these people who are going to go back around what I would call design thinking basics, to help them understand how do you do some pilots in safe ways to try out your ideas before you just try to foist them on everybody. But those are things we can work out. But those are some basics around a more bottom-up driven approach. It's going to be, again, an iterative thing. With each cycle you run of that 80 to 120 people, we're going to learn something and we're going to get better at it each time. And the steering committee is going to be able to kind of be on top of making it go smoother and better and more engaging with each running of 80 to 120 people. Much better way, much more sustainable, and you're going to have people coming out of that fired up in ways that you got to be ready for. Good luck.